Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Daniel Ibri of Mindset Ventures. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Hall. Pleasure.
So what was your background before you started investing in early stage companies?
So I actually graduated in business in Brazil. I'm actually now in São Paulo, Brazil. I'm Brazilian. I studied also in the US in quite a few schools. And then I started my career in the consulting world. I was doing strategic consulting for big multinational corporations, mostly M&A and strategic planning. And then I actually kind of jumped to the entrepreneurial market, started mentoring for Endeavor back in 2009, 2010. Then I started mentor for other accelerators, mainly in Brazil, one in Portugal. Kind of fell in love with this whole entrepreneurial thing and all the community of VC and startups and etc. Started teaching in one of the biggest business schools here in Brazil. And then eventually I decided to start my first fund in 2011, 2012. So that's how I started in VC, and that all led to building Mindset later on. I can tell a little bit more about the story if you want.
For sure. So you invest in the B2B sector. Can you tell us what led you to start investing in that one versus all the other choices that are out there?
Of course. So part of our thesis is to invest outside of Brazil. So we're mainly more or less a Brazilian fund, I would say. So we have a team here in Brazil, myself and my co-founder based in São Paulo. We have one partner in San Francisco, one in Tel Aviv. So we only invest in US and Israel. And the idea is to invest outside of Brazil, especially Brazilian money we raise from Brazilian LPs, and help foreign companies do business in Brazil. So we think that we can add more value in the B2B space where we can really open relevant doors here in Brazil and help companies penetrate the market, find relevant connections, and start generating traction and revenues here. So that's part of why we are doing B2B. The second reason, and not less important, is if you are a smaller fund and you can rely on smaller exits, you can rely on M&As and maybe some quick exits in your portfolio. B2Bs are the kinds of startups that really can provide that, right? If you are doing B2C, normally they depend on higher investments, higher growth, longer cycles. You build your scale, you build your audience, and then if you're very successful or lucky, at the end you get bought or you do an IPO or something like that. But if you're not a huge fund and you can provide a good payback for your investors into M&A, you see much more M&As coming from the B2B space where a startup provide a good product or technology to a client, and then this client, maybe a big enterprise, ends up buying this company. So we feel that the exits have a higher probability happening into B2B. So that's the second reason.
So we have a lot of investors who listen to the show and they're always looking for tips and so forth. What's your advice for people that want to start investing in the B2B sector? What should they be looking for?
So first of all, good founders, right? So it doesn't matter if you're investing B2B, B2C, or anywhere in the world, I would say looking to people is the 1, 2, and 3 priority you should have. So finding good entrepreneurs, good teams. We tend not to invest in solo founders, but it's just our vision. So we like teams, we like complementary between the people. We like people that are some kind of experience in that segment. They are becoming entrepreneurs, or they have been past entrepreneurs, either successful or not, doesn't matter, if they learn from the past experience. So I think people is the most important. And then if they're doing more specifically on the business side, if they're going for B2B, they need to find companies that create some kind of product or technology that really adds value to other bigger organizations, and something that these organizations would take too much money or too much time building themselves, right? So that's what will make them first become clients and buy your product as customers, and second, eventually acquire your company. So I would say like anything that has patents or that has deeper science inside, or very good technology, or something that really has some kind of barrier to entry, where corporations will have some kind of incentive to become your customers or acquirers.
Well, great. Well, how is the state of investing in B2B progressing? How is the industry evolving? You talked about how it was very efficient for capital to deploy and get companies up to speed. But what else is going on that you see in the B2B world?
So there's much less hype in the B2B space, right? The normally all the hype and the big stories that we normally hear are about B2C, and these are the companies that people in the world end up using as users. So we know better about WhatsApp and Instagram and Uber and all those stuff. But there are lots of very, very interesting things happening on the B2B space. And the more the technology grows and becomes specialized, the harder it is for big corporations to develop niche or specific solutions inside. Because the knowledge ends up being so specific that companies need to hire people with several backgrounds to be able to create that inside, right? So we see lots of startups in the B2B space normally tackling sometimes, small niche problems that can be niched for maybe for them on a market perspective, but for a big corporation is a huge problem that represents a lot of money. So we see lots and lots and lots of things going on, from enterprise software to agriculture to healthcare to fintech. It's really booming out there.
And so what should the investor keep in mind in going into the B2B world as far as working with enterprises? What makes for a successful B2B application from the investor's point of view?
So I think, first of all, you need to keep in mind that sales cycles can be really long, right? So people normally don't consider that too much, and they start selling B2B, and then they forget that sometimes can take companies 6 months to a year to just simply run a POC and maybe turn into a paid customer. So you need to have some kind of buffer and working capital to go through that cycles. Second, you need some kind of specific sales force or sales team or channel partners to be able to reach these guys. It's not just like knocking on the doors or doing cold calls. It's not going to convert a big client on a good solution. So you need to have some kind of a very specific marketing and sales approach to be able to reach big enterprise consumers. But if you do that, if you have a good product, one or two very senior sales guys, maybe a good distributor or integrator, and if you have the breadth to go through the sales cycle, I think you can be very, very successful, especially if you have something that is really hard for them to develop by themselves.
I noticed you have quite a range of companies in your portfolio and was interested in your investment thesis for it. You mentioned that a great team was the starting point, and that's, I think, true for most fundings. But what else do you look for in a startup that you might want to invest in?
Sure. So regarding thesis, so first of all, as I said, we invest only in companies based in the US and Israel. So that's very important for us, the geographic scope. Of course, very good teams, as you mentioned, B2B. And inside B2B, there are 5 or 6 segments that we focus a little bit more. So healthcare, cybersecurity, education, fintech, and agriculture. And one of the part of our thesis is to invest in these companies and help them come to Brazil or to Latin America, where we are focused. So, of course, one of the variables that we look in the companies is how can we add value to them, and would they have any kind of success if we help them come to the Brazilian market, right? Can we add values? Can we bring customers? Do we have the relevant connections? So that's very important. And then, of course, analyzing the technology, if they have a good pipeline of development, if they have a good roadmap, if they have patents, if they're already generating revenue. So we tend to invest closer to Series A, sometimes a little bit early, a little bit after, but it's normally Series A. So we try to see some kind of revenue traction or customer traction. We try to analyze customers, whether they are enterprise or SMBs, whether they're happy using the solutions or not. So those are things that we always take a look at.
So you offered to bring them into Brazil, and there's many advantages to go into international countries. What's the advantage of going and setting up shop in Brazil for a startup that's coming out of the US, for example?
Yeah, so Brazil is a huge market, right? So we have more than 200 million people, lots of big enterprises. They're actually Brazilian enterprises. Almost all of the big international corporations have some kind of presence or headquarters here in Brazil as well. So that's one thing. So the size of the market is really relevant. Second, what we've seen through the times is that the cost of doing business in Brazil is much lower than the US, for instance, right? Of course, you have all the problems with bureaucracy and all those things that you hear about, but the cost of doing business here, the cost of conquering new clients, the competition is much, much smaller. So you can really use Brazil as a very good platform for scale and also for testing new kinds of solutions and products. And then once you reach maturity and you gain some kind of confidence, then you can go to more competitive markets like the US, for instance, right? So we've seen 2 trends. So one is, if we are working, for instance, with an Israeli company, this is the typical example that I gave. So Israel, unfortunately, doesn't have a relevant market inside. So always ready startups. They produce very good tech, but they need to go abroad, otherwise they don't have a market. So the normal way is you build in Israel, you go to the US. But if you do that, the cost of deploying the US and fighting competition, etc., is normally tough for startups. What you can do is you can come to Brazil, you can scale, you can mess around a lot, you can just do lots of bad things and nobody will know about you. And then you fix stuff, you scale, you learn how to work with big corporations. And then once you're ready, then you go to the US and you conquer the market. So that's one path. The other path is for American startups, which have already a very good internal market, maybe the best in the world, but sometimes they need early adopters in their kind of tech. Sometimes they are looking for emerging markets. Sometimes they need a test platform for their products. So coming to Brazil is a very good solution. If you see all good examples like WhatsApp, Facebook, Uber, like Brazil is top 3 for all these apps, right? So it's no coincidence. We are early adopters, very big market, and you can really generate very, very good traction here.
So can you mention one or two portfolio companies that you have that are a good fit for your investment thesis and why you chose them?
Of course. So one of the companies I would mention, I'll take one from Israel first. It's called Taranis. And Taranis is an ag tech company. So invested in them in seed, Series A and Series B. So they closed Series B a few months ago. So it's an agri-tech company. They do like precision agriculture with a very, very, very interesting technology. And that's a very natural fit for Brazil, right? If you're doing something agriculture, Brazil is on your roadmap somehow. So we invested in them. Of course, first we believe in the vision. The tech was great and it was a great team, but it was very early stage. But then we helped them come to market in Brazil. We helped them hire a country manager, open shop here, open a subsidiary, reach the first customers, and they really scaled up in Brazil. Now, of course, they are also doing business in Israel, US, Russia, Argentina, Brazil, but we're really hands-on in making them do business in Brazil. So that was a very, very good case of not only investing, the company is doing amazingly well post-Series B, but also helping them grow in the local market. So
you sound like you have a good startup there that's doing well with the program you offer as far as getting help, and it sounds like it's working out well.
Yeah, you're completely right. So, and we have other cases. So we have a company in the US called PayJoy based in San Francisco. So this company is doing amazingly well, and they have a very specific focus for emerging markets. So it's not only US, they're doing very well in Mexico, but they want to go for emerging markets. So they recently started doing business in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Brazil. So that's why we invested. So it's a great technology, great company, great team. Also trying to do business in Brazil, and they realize that it's very hard because you need to know the right people, have the right connections. And we thought we really could help, so we invested and we are helping, and they are doing very well here. And they will soon announce the close of our next round. So they're doing very well as well. So just to give you an example of a US or Israeli company.
I see. Very good. So what are the challenges in the B2B space? You mentioned the long sales cycle, but what are the other challenges you face in working in it? Is it competition? Is it brand loyalty? Or what do you find is the key issue?
So besides the sales cycle, I think competition is hard, right? It's very difficult to find something that big companies really need that has not been invented or tested yet, right? So there's always someone knocking on the door trying to sell something similar to you and trying to prove they're better. So this is one thing. The second thing is, of course, about price. And price meaning that you need always to run pilots and POCs, and then you can try to convert into a paid customer, and they always want to pay a small fee and then grow over time. So managing cash flow overall, price and terms of contracts and churn with competition and long sales cycles is always a challenge. But once you manage that and once you do a long contract with a good amount, with a good satisfied customer, then they are your customers for life. So it's just something you need to be prepared to work with.
Well, that's great. So in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I think that's about it, Ho. I really appreciate the time. So if people want to know more about Mindset, they can access our website, mindset.ventures. We have all information about us, about the team. All the portfolio is there. We now have 36 or 37 companies. You can filter by region, by geography, etc. So it's pretty interesting, and feel free to reach out if you're interested in learning more.
Great. We'll put that information in the show notes. Appreciate your taking time today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon. and wish you success with your portfolios.
Thank you very much, Hall. My pleasure.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.